Good morning. For about a year and a half or so. I am personally healing some of my own religious trauma wounds by being here, as I'm sure is the case for many of us. I would like to extend a special welcome to all those who are joining us here for the first time. We are divide. First, we're going to show the people joining us on Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. Now, people at home, wave. We are frozen. Some minor technical difficulties. I'm sure you're all waving wonderfully, though. Now, people who are attending the service in our building, it is your turn to wave, and hopefully the folks on Zoom can see us waving. We do have a couple of announcements. Not that I know of. No? No announcements. Okay. We preface our service by acknowledging our church was built on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Shishums. Remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We are hoping that folks joining us via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
Good morning. I am the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, and I have the incredible honor of serving this congregation as its minister. So many people come to, sorry. Many people come to serve as yarn winders, it turns out. Sorry. Very helpful. Anyway, sorry. Many people come to Unitarian Universalism as spiritual refugees. They fled their childhood or earlier iterations of their faith, often because they've outgrown them. I sometimes joke that Unitarian Universalists often are people who got in trouble in Sunday school for asking questions that their Sunday school teachers didn't know how to answer or didn't want to answer. We're people who like to think for ourselves. We form opinions, we choose beliefs, all based on our own internal compass. This means we don't tend to respond well to any truth that is dictated from on high. Sometimes, though, it was harmful or abusive behavior that drove us out of the religious tradition we were raised in. If this is the case, we bring with us a certain kind of baggage, not just resistance to dogma, but sensitivity to words, rituals, or other liturgical elements. For people who experienced religious trauma, religion, even Unitarian Universalism, can be triggering. So today's service will focus on acknowledging and healing from religious trauma. This is tender territory, so I want to say up front, please take care of yourself in whatever way you need. I'll be sharing some simple grounding techniques with the kids shortly, and those techniques also work for grown-ups. But if you need to step out, if you need to go for a walk, take a break, get a cup of tea, go out in the hallway and jump up and down and shake it off, please do so. And members of our pastoral ministry team will be available downstairs after the service in the religious education office, which is on the first floor at the end of the hallway on the right, if you need to talk more or would like to process your experience or just have some conversation. But let's start by singing together. We're going to sing number 1009 in the Teal hymnal, Meditation on Breathing. The words will be up on your screen. This song has 3 parts. There's a drone, and so those of you who like the drone can actually just stay there. There's a melody part, and then there's a descant which comes up high. I think many of us know it. If you don't know it, stay on the drone or just do what feels comfortable. So I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe in love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
All right, now let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are on your screen. We typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offerings to local charities whose missions align with our values, a program called the Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is Coast Transportation, a program of the Council on Aging which provides rides for all citizens who need access to basic necessities or activities enhancing the quality of their lives here on the Palouse and beyond. To donate, please indicate Month of Sundays on your check or from the online drop-down menu. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity together.
So when I attended Alex's recital, he played a piece that brought tears to my eyes. It was deeply, deeply moving. And I wanted him to play it here, but it's longer than we usually allow for in terms of our music. So instead of a spoken meditation, we're just going to be held by Alex on the piano. Alex, did you want to say something about the piece?
Yeah, so I did play this for my recital a few weeks ago, and on the topic of pluralism, actually, I wanted to mention a couple things about this piece. It's composed by a Spanish composer by the name of Isaac Albeniz, and it's a part of it's a part of a suite for the solo piano, and it's made up of 4 books, and it's called Iberia, and in terms of like the Iberian Peninsula in Spain. And so the whole set, the whole suite, and especially this song, have a lot of influences from like traditional Spanish flamenco singing and dancing, those types of rhythms, but then also like right across the peninsula in northern Africa, you have a lot of those traditions and sounds and rhythms as well. So I hope you enjoy El Albaicin. Thank you.
You see why I wanted him to do it here. Thanks, Alex. Thank you so much. So our reading this morning comes from a book called Sacred Wounds, A Path to Healing from Spiritual Trauma by Teresa Pasquale. She writes, "This is the healing calling, to take with us what came before, but not the emotional baggage attached, and to transcend, moving deeper and deeper to the root of our true and authentic self, carrying the wisdom, the heart and soul of our experience and what we have learned through healing with us into our deeper levels of truth." I say that simply but not flippantly. This is not easy. To transcend, we must forgive and release hurt. To transcend, we must be able to let go enough to trust that our inward journey is taking us somewhere better, even and especially when it is uncomfortable to get there. So a few weeks ago, I sent out a survey for come-outers. A come-outer is a term that we Unitarian Universalists use for people who have come out of other religious traditions and found their way here. About 20 people filled the survey out. Some of them were members of this congregation, and some were not. Several respondents came out of Catholicism. Several left various flavors of evangelical Christianity, and a couple identified themselves as former Mormons. Their reasons for leaving were wide-ranging. One person wrote, "The glorification of the pastor's role to start, politicizing spirituality, equating secular as sin, and forgiveness concepts became a shelter for abuse." Another shared, "My decision was made one Saturday after I left the confessional. I recall I was seeking some wisdom and realized in that moment there was none to be had there." One person named, "I transitioned through less and less evangelical, biblical, literal denominations until finally, in the Episcopal Church, I realized that I couldn't say the Nicene Creed because I didn't believe the part about Christ sacrificing his life to atone for my sins." Some people pointed to the moment when they'd learned they'd been taught lies. Others to pervasive homophobia or misogyny. Some just got curious or had spiritual experiences that led them in different directions. One said, "I just didn't feel it anymore." And another, "It just didn't make sense." However, several people pointed to toxic theologies of sin and atonement. My friend Katie Sheridan, who lives in New Mexico, shared a poem she wrote. "Each morning before I quite awaken, I begin to feel the enormous weight of it on my small child body, the heaviness. I hear the shrill screams of others who have been condemned like me. I see the flickering flames, feel the searing heat. I try to imagine the length of eternity. My chest heaves as I suck in the hot air of the hell I am told awaits me for my little sins." A few respondents were kicked out of church because of their behavior or because of their parents' behavior. A few left because they weren't willing to be shamed for their or their parents' behavior. Several referenced hypocrisy and or the lack of accountability for religious leaders. 2 were sexually abused, one by a youth advisor and another by her priest for 15 years. The vast majority then left because of what could be categorized as spiritual or religious abuse. Now, therapist Brooks Baer defines spiritual abuse as an interpersonal experience between two people. Often the abuser is a religious leader attempting to control or manipulate someone lower in the religious hierarchy, such as a volunteer, community member, or visitor. It may be a parent using religion to abuse a child, or a spouse drawing on religious doctrine to assert their right to dominate or control their partner. He suggests the following questions to determine whether a person has been a victim of spiritual abuse. Has someone ever used or attempted to use my religious beliefs or practices to manipulate me into certain actions? Am I free to practice my faith at home? Has a parent or a partner ever tried to force their religion on me? Have my religious leaders ever tried to justify domestic violence or protect known abusers? Has my boss ever limited my ability to work or the opportunity for promotion based on my expressed belief in or disavowal of a certain faith? Have my religious leaders ever recommended I stay in an abusive or harmful situation in order to grow closer to my God? Do I have freedom of choice in how I live my life, raise my children, interact with my partner, and so on? Or are those decisions made for me by my religious leaders? Baer goes on to define religious trauma as a systemic experience between a person and their religion as a whole. Often the trauma is not linked to one specific person, but to a series of people over a period of time who enforce a traumatizing message or fail to help when a traumatizing situation takes place. Common signs and symptoms of religious trauma include self-hatred, shame, perfectionism, difficulty making decisions, hypervigilance, lack of healthy boundaries, delayed social milestones and sexual dysfunction, particularly if the person has been a part of so-called purity culture, and mental health disorders, including PTSD, OCD, depression, anxiety, eating orders, and addiction. You overwhelmed? Box breathing. Really, what I want you to take away is this simple truth that coercive and authoritarian religions are damaging to the psyche. It's that simple. Coercive and authoritarian religions are damaging to the psyche. Religious trauma syndrome, because it's extended trauma over time, winds up looking a lot like complex PTSD. So, what can we do to help people heal? Because that's the real question, right? Like, where do we go from here? How do we help people heal? And I think first, of course, we try to avoid re-traumatizing by not being coercive and not having a lot of hierarchy. We are anything but coercive here. We might have conversations and share and articulate our own points of view, but we shouldn't be trying to convince or control. Rather, our shared growth and evolution happen through a slow and careful relational process. Just as an example, in 1987, we launched our Welcoming Congregation program to help people explore their experiences and biases around diverse sexualities and gender identities. The program involved at least a year of conversation and sharing. Brave folks just told their stories, their coming out stories, but also their stories of being bullied or rejected or treated as less than human. And the rest of their community listened and wrestled with what they had been taught or what they had internalized earlier in life. Hearts opened and shifted. But it was only at the end of this long conversation, relational process that congregations were invited to vote on becoming welcoming and affirming. And spoiler alert, almost all of our congregations voted overwhelmingly in favor. Love won. So our congregations are places that not only accept but celebrate individual expressions of gender and sexuality. But there were some people who couldn't get on board with the changes and left. No one was pushed to do or say or believe anything they weren't ready for. And many of those folks eventually found their way back and were warmly welcomed. We're also anything but authoritarian. Could almost say we're anti-authoritarian. Our UU congregations are organized with around congregational polity. All of the power lives with the people. And this is not just a structural issue, it's a deeply theological one. For UUs, clergy and other religious professionals are not special or more powerful or somehow better than the folks we serve. I have some training that helps me do church stuff, and it's my job, so I spend more time on it than volunteers. But I'm super clear, this is your congregation. You decide what your priorities are, where we're going, what we're doing next. You decide, I respond. But it's not coercive in this direction either, as in, I do get to choose what I will or will not do. If people want me to shift my priorities or have issues with the way I'm doing my job, we talk it through. Again, it's a heart-centered, relational process, which is not to say that Unitarian Universalists are perfect. People are by nature imperfect, and bad stuff has happened, but we've done our best to hold people accountable for harm. And I think we've done better than most denominations, and we're still working on it. We use covenants, agreements as to how we're going to treat one another, as the basis for addressing those inevitable situations where people bump up against each other and come away bruised or even bleeding. Some people are asked to leave our communities because the things they've done are so egregious that trust is destroyed. More often, they choose to leave rather than participating in a process where they're asked to listen deeply to the person they've harmed and accept responsibility for their actions. It can be messy and complicated, but overall, I think it's a better system than ones that are primarily punitive. But beyond avoiding causing harm in the first place and then addressing harm when it happens, I believe our congregations can function as healing spaces where people who are recovering from religious trauma are supported as they work through their experiences. I want to share a graphic from the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine. Can you see it well enough? Can't read it. Okay. It's got lots of words. Concentrate on the big words. Don't worry about the little words. So in the middle, you have that window of tolerance. The window of tolerance, this is where we feel calm and safe. We're able to make connections. We're able to be creative. We're able to be present to one another and to the world. Now, as we become stressed, or you'll hear me use the word dysregulated, we move in one of two directions. Either we move toward hyperarousal, that's up on top, feeling increasingly frustrated and agitated until we get to a place where we're overwhelmed or angry or reactive. Or we move toward hypoarousal. We shut down, we numb out, we zone out, we feel despair, we get frozen. Now, growth and healing happen in the yellow zone, when we're on the edge, when we're becoming dysregulated. Practices like the ones I taught the kids help us regulate when we're in that space, and that broadens our window of tolerance. Other practices that do that are music, meditation, therapy, time spent in nature, movement, laughter, and social support. As our window of tolerance expands, our capacity to be present becomes greater. So when we're together in church and people become triggered or dysregulated, when our tender places or our trauma get activated, we need to access the people and the strategies that help us regulate. And so I believe this religious community and religious communities like it become the perfect setup to heal from religious-based trauma. I'm going to pause for just a second. Are there any questions? There's a lot of information. Are you with me so far? Okay. So when we are together and we have to make a choice to engage with our trauma rather than avoid it. I've known come-outers with religious trauma who try to force or coerce the people around them to avoid using any religious language or symbolism that might be triggering. We call it the phenomenon of cross-cringe. And it shows up in our churches sometimes. I have a colleague who has a congregant who sent an angry letter every single time that minister used the word God in any context at any point in his work. Like pages letter. It shows up when a person's accused of being too Christian for talking about Jesus on Christian holidays like Christmas or Easter. That one's happened to me more than once. As a stay-inner, somebody who grew up Unitarian Universalist, I will confess that sometimes I get frustrated when people complain about engagement with traditional theological themes or concepts. How do we hold the tension between person A's legitimate need to share their spiritual journey and person B's legitimate need to avoid being triggered by a particular word, phrase, or ritual? I think we have to hold it the same way we hold all the other tensions that are inevitable in community life, in that heart-centered relational way. If I'm person A wanting to use these words, I care about person B. And so if they share their experience and say that my words are hurting them, I'm going to do my best to avoid those words when I'm in their presence. And if I'm person B, I care about person A. So I'm going to advocate for them to have spaces and times to explore their spirituality freely. Person B also, because they care about person A, works on their own healing. They take responsibility for their response rather than blaming or shaming person A. It's important that we don't treat each other as intellectually or morally inferior for exploring a spiritual path that doesn't or didn't work for me, right? I'm not going to treat anyone as intellectually or morally inferior for exploring a path that didn't or doesn't work for me, because I care about their well-being, and I'm mature enough to understand that when it comes to questions of faith, there are no right answers and there are no wrong answers, except the answers that hurt us or hurt others. Some of the respondents to my survey gave testimony as to the healing potential in our UU congregations. Jessica Swan wrote, "Sometimes it would trigger my nervous system during certain UU rituals that would be similar to the childhood services I endured. But with practice, my system learned to find safety in this new community. Compassionate listening, empathy, healthy, inclusive community, and friendship have all helped me in healing from this trauma. What a blessing the UU community is for me." And Anne Brown wrote, "I feel at home here. It's a safe place to be. I'm not put on a pedestal or told I need to rise to meet a particular standard. I don't have to believe anything I don't honestly believe to be accepted. There are no loyalty tests. I know I won't be kicked out for anything but harming others. My questions and explorations are welcome instead of being judged. I do have a lot of healing to do. The most helpful thing is watching everyone embrace each other. None of this is for show. People who want to sing, sing. People who want to preach, preach. People who want to serve, serve. I love watching everyone be patient and kind with everyone as they try hard, whether they manage to be wonderful or not. At church, the messages and interactions are a gentle and accepting balm. People listen and are kind. I don't have to pretend I'm put together or strive for any particular standard. I'm just me. That means a lot." Now, my sister is a physician. And we had a conversation once where she said, among other things, that doctors don't actually heal. They work to clear obstacles to healing and support the body's healing process. The same can be said of healing from spiritual abuse or religious trauma. Other people can clear obstacles. We can create a community where people are supported. But each of us still has to do our own work, engaging, box breathing, self-regulating. Ultimately, we find our way to inner peace, to a way of being human that works for us. We find a spiritual path that feels good and right and leads somewhere life-sustaining. The resilience of the human spirit is truly awe-inspiring. So if we are a safe landing place for spiritual refugees, may we also be a place where people can put down roots, a place where we can all go as deep as we want, where we can stretch as far as feels right, a place where love is able to work its magic in every interaction so that we all find peace and joy and blessing. So be it, and blessed be. Let's sing together now hymn number 1012, "When I Am Frightened." Our closing reading is by Richard Rohr. All great spirituality is about what we do with our pain. By trying to handle all suffering through willpower, denial, medication, or even therapy, we've forgotten something that should be obvious. We do not handle suffering. Suffering handles us in deep and mysterious ways that ironically become the very matrix of life. Suffering and sometimes awe has the most power to lead us into genuinely new experiences. Let's sing together our musical benediction, There is a Love. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice that it might go gently in our hearts. May it guide our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. If we're a hospital for the spiritually wounded, and I can embrace that metaphor, the idea is to heal people and send them on their way, not to stay in the hospital forever. So let us claim our capacity to hold each other, to love each other, and to be present to the pain that will transform us if we let it have its way with us. I love you all. Go in peace. Come back next Sunday.